Hello and welcome to the Underhive. I hope you enjoyed your festive period, however you choose to celebrate. Today I wanted to talk about the Arks of Omen community post on Warhammer Community, releasing a few little teasers of what's to come, but also the detachment and a stratagem that happens in the requisition phase, which is going to relate to how you want to build your list. So, of course, makes sense to talk about it alongside the detachment. So let's dive in first and take a look at the Arks of Omen detachment itself. So this is a 0 CP detachment, which largely I think is going to be 99% of the detachments we see going forward in Warzone Arks of Omen. It replaces the battalion, the spearhead, the vanguard, the outrider in an all-in-one incredibly flexible package. And first and foremost, whilst I do think there is some ability to exploit and abuse that flexibility for certain armies, I think on the whole, for the game, just broadly, not talking about top level competition, I think it's a great change. It's very straightforward and a lot easier to get to grips with for newer players, understanding how they need to put a list together and really reducing the limitations, allowing you to just build a list the way you want to play it. And I think whilst, yes, the competitive aspect's important, we don't really want to see any lists that go absolutely skew one way and as a result are stomping everyone. But the flip side is the flexibility is available to everybody. If you do build a list that way, chances are there is a way to build a list that will absolutely shut that one down. And if you run up against that in a tournament, you've only got yourself to blame. So of course, yes, we will touch on a couple of the things that I think will be benefited by that. But first and foremost, let's have a look at the detachment itself. So, restrictions. All units must be from the same faction, and that faction cannot be Imperium, Chaos, Eldari, or Tyranids. The point being there, it doesn't stop you playing any of those factions, it's just that they are some of the broadest keywords in the game, if not the broadest. So, of course, you can run an Arks of Omen detachment if your whole army has the Death Guard keyword. They will also have the Chaos keyword, but it's not the Chaos keyword that allows them to take the detachment. It's the fact that they're all Death Guard, all Thousand Suns, all Raven Guard, all Simhan, whatever you want to do. So command benefits, none, but it is a free CP, 0 CP stratagem, so there's no refund required. Now, the compulsory units will consist of 1 HQ, unless you're playing Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights, because of course they are Lords of War. And then besides that, you must have 3 units in a singular Force Org slot. So they don't have to be the same unit, but they need to fill the same Force Org slot. So you would need to have either 3 troops, 3 elites, 3 fast attack, 3 heavy support, or 3 Lords of War. So whatever faction it is you play in, whatever your favourite unit is, you may want to take 3 of them, and that's going to fill out your compulsory units straight up. Otherwise, you might only want to take 2, but it's not going to be too hard to crowbar in 1 more unit of that slot at a minimum to hit your compulsory target. From there, you can have a further 0 to 9 troops, and then it's pretty much 0 to 3 of everything else for elites, fast attack, heavy support, Lord of War, HQ, interestingly. Flyers is just 0 to 2. Fortifications, you can have 0 to 3. And you can have a further 0 to 3 elites that are character units only. You are also able to take dedicated transport in a 1-for-1 ratio against infantry units. So every infantry unit you've got, you can take a dedicated transport. So for as far as the edition up to now, the battalion has been the most common detachment. I think that's quite clear as to why. It gives you the elite slot, which is where some of the more interesting units are for most factions. But you have, of course, got the Spearhead, Outrider, and Vanguard for the fast attacks, elite, and heavy support in the respective orders. I've jumbled those up. But this does mean then that with the Arks of Omen Detachment, your existing battalion, outrider, spearhead, vanguard is still going to be valid because you've either got 6 elites, 6 fast attack, 6 heavy support, whatever it might be. So you've at least got your minimum 3, or you wouldn't have run that detachment. And then you could still fill in the troops as you have previously. You probably got 3 or more troops in there, or at least 2, but you can still throw them in there because you've got your 9 available troop slots. But the big one there for me is the HQ slot going from 2 to 3 up to 1 required and then an additional 0 to 3, meaning that you can run 4 HQs without an additional detachment required. That is a very big for the likes of Blood Angels, I would say, that have those HQ slots at premium. But of course, it does open flexibility for a wide variety of armies that might want to include multiple cheaper HQ slots now that they can over one perhaps more expensive HQ that's a bit more survivable or has a more high output effect. 2 of a lower output effect may actually be preferable in some scenarios. Now, on top of that, I think relevant to discuss alongside the HQ slot is the heroic support stratagem. Use this in the requisition phase before when you're mustering your army, so before the game. It's at the list building stage. If a detachment ability would limit the number of times you can include a unit in the detachment to 1, you can include a maximum of 2 of that unit in the detachment instead, and you can only use that stratagem once. So of course, Farsight Enclaves, big losers there, because the wording is if you're limited to 1, you can have 2. Farsight Enclaves can't have the Ethereal, so they can have 2 commanders, but they're not limited to 1, they're limited to 2, and so this does nothing. Which is a bit of a shame for Farsight Enclaves, but maybe they'll reword the Farsight Enclave's ability and give them something a bit extra instead. Because the bottom line is now with the Arks of Omen Detachment, you only need to run 1 commander if you only want to run 1 anyway. You're not limited to that minimum 2 as you would have been with a battalion. So as far as the Death Guard, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think this changes a lot because pretty much every build you would have otherwise run is still available. And in the grand scheme of things, the Death Guard Codex is actually quite narrow. There are a lot of units in there, but some of them just aren't that effective. There is a better choice depending what role that unit needs to fill in your game plan. And so you're going to lean into a Plague Burst Crawler for that thick, heavy boy fire support from the back. You're probably not going to start running a Predator just because you could without it being a spearhead. So ultimately, I don't think it's going to start introducing more units from the codex that previously haven't seen play, unless an associated balance patch actually buffs them to a state where they're competitive against the Death Guard Demon Engines, which are quite prevalent in balanced lists or lists that want to gear towards heavy vehicle support. But we mentioned Blood Angels already. I think the fact that they can have that extra HQ slot going to be very, very nice for Blood Angels. I will say, I've seen it said that the additional heroic support stratagem benefits Space Marines because they want to run 2 captains. I think with the amount of denying rerolls or hit transhuman, so you can only be hit on a 4-up, or you can only be hit on a 4-up and you can't reroll, or you can only be hit on a 4-up and you're -1 to hit. Looking at you, Harlequins. Ultimately, I don't think running more captains is necessarily that beneficial. But when you look at the non-codex compliant Marines, yes, certainly things start to piece together a little bit more there. In terms of being able to spam elites, yeah, okay, fine. They can still only have the 6 elite slots, but that Bannerman doesn't need to fill up one of those elite slots now. So you could have your 3 Sangard and your 3 Jump Pack Van Vets and go absolutely ham on striking from above. So again, I do think there are going to be some lists out there. I am more of a Marine player than anything else, be they the Death Guard or otherwise. So that's kind of where my mind will lean when sort of considering exploitation of certain rules. But I don't actually think that that's that bad. Because again, if you're doing that, you're investing heavily in mobility, fine, but when something has the firepower or the melee output to really deal with them, they're not going to look so good at that point. And again, they're not likely to have that sort of massive damage output at ranged if you go in with that sort of build. And so as a result, you may lose to an army that can keep you at range. So again, I don't think there's anything obviously hectic here in terms of the way exploits could come about. But I will say I am not the most competitive list builder in the game by a long shot. I'm sure someone will work out some ways to exploit this. But for me, I think it's overall just a great change, much more straightforward. We're not going to have to sort of define, oh, right, okay, so this is a spearhead. These are my 6 choices for my spearhead, and I've definitely got the troops there. I've definitely got the HQs. It's a legit detachment. Arks of Omen, straightforward. I've got 1 HQ there, and I've got 3 troops there, so we're definitely covered. This is the rest of the list. That I think is going to be a lot nicer for new players, not only when they're building the list, but also when they're running through the list with their opponents, just keeping things nice and clear. And of course, hopefully with the balanced data slate in the near future, we might see some of the units that we expect to see in certain lists. So Blood Angels, you expect to see Sandguard. Death Guard, you expect to see Plague Marines and Terminators. We might see some kind of internal codex balancing for those units and start to see a wider variety of units in any given list rather than the same old favourites. Now, I'm not against running a list like that. If I was going to run Blood Angels, I would want 20, 30 Sandguard because, they're the poster boys. I don't see anything wrong with it, but I know some people don't like it. And so hopefully the balanced data slate will address those ways to exploit this new flexibility. And I'm sure they had that in mind when they put this together. So because we've not seen the full picture yet, it's quite easy to get doom and gloom, but we might not actually get to that point. One other thing here to add is that this does open up the dreaded 90 Plague Marine list. Now, I've seen a good few examples of lists with 60 Plague Marines from the likes of Steve or Stephen Trimble. I'm not sure which he prefers to go by. It's listed both ways on Goonhammer. But he's done well over the last 6 months, placing on podium several times with 60-man Plague Marine lists, along with some supporting units, of course. This would allow you to go the whole hog. So you could take your 1 HQ as a Malignant Plaguecaster, keeping it cheap at 90 points. You got 3 of your obligatory slots, 3 troop slots, 10-man Plague Marine squads, and then another 6 troop slots full of Plague Marines, again, 10-man squads. So that is going to come in at 1,890 points, along with the 90 from the Plaguecaster. Leaves you 20 points left over to chuck on some deadly pathogens onto a champion or 2 if you fancy. But ultimately, that is 30 Plague Marine bodies per objective that you need to secure to score points well in the game. Obviously, there's a bit more to it than just playing the primary, but to be honest, I don't think that list is oppressive in a way that it shouldn't exist. But it's certainly an oppressive list on paper. I mean, that amount of wounds to chew through with 3-up saves, Armour of Contempt at all T5 with -1 damage is a hell of a thing to deal with. Bearing in mind, you can probably get some cover on at least one of those objectives. That is just an inordinate amount of bodies to chew through. It's something I would be interested in trying out, but I'm definitely not going out there to buy another 60, 70 Plague Marines just to try that out. But I think the fact that can now exist is a good thing, because ultimately, if somebody tries that and that does actually stomp the meta, then they know what they need to address. They know the Plague Marines are individually too strong when they can be brought in such numbers, and maybe they move away from this flexibility in the future. I don't expect we'll actually see anybody go that far, because it is a little bit skew. I think you can agree 9 of the same troop choice definitely skew. But again, I don't think having that flexibility is so bad, because we haven't seen the secondary objectives yet. We haven't seen the balanced data slate that will come in the near future. So once we've got all that together, of course, that will give us a better picture of how imbalanced something could be. But for now, I am hopeful. I think it's great for new players. And hopefully in the new year, we may well see perhaps people have received things over the holidays, or perhaps got a bit of money that they've received and want to spend that on a new hobby. And hopefully with this new flexibility, this more straightforward detachment building, we may even see more new players into the game, which I think is something that we can all appreciate and want for the game. Well, let me know what you think. Have you foreseen any crazy lists? I would love to know as it goes. I know Chaos Knights and Knights generally can be pretty busted anyway. I would expect we will see some pretty busted Free Blade Knight builds, but I don't think that comes down to the Arks of Omen. I think that just comes down to the way that Free Blade Knights are just very strong at the moment. I don't think they're busted broken, but I think they're strong. So yeah, I'd be interested if you can foresee any crazy lists, and of course, if you do comment, I will keep those in the mind, ready for when we see these changes and whether or not your premonitions are correct, or whether actually GW have fixed the thing in advance and they foresaw what we did as well. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you if you choose to get involved in the comments. Really does mean a lot to me, and I will see you next time in the Underhive.